the grand kingdom of Lothmere. Queen Isolde was loved by all, but her heart hid a venom darker than any serpent's. Her son, Prince Alaric, was young, kind, and adored by the people, but his popularity became her greatest fear. The nobles whispered that Alaric's rule would outshine his mother's reign, and soon her once loving gaze turned cold. At a royal feast celebrating the harvest, Isolde raised a jeweled goblet filled with ruby-red wine. "To my beloved son, the pride of Lothmere," she said with a trembling smile. Alaric drank deeply, unaware that the sweetness masked the bitter death beneath. Within moments, his laughter turned to choking gasps, and the court watched in horror as life drained from his face. The queen's cries echoed through the halls, perfectly rehearsed, perfectly tragic. The royal physician declared it a mysterious illness, and the kingdom mourned. But in the silence of her chamber, Isolde's reflection in the mirror sneered back at her mother, who had murdered her own blood for a crown that no longer shone. Her reign lasted 7 more years, but her nights were haunted by the sound of her son whispering, "Why, mother?" In the kingdom of Arendelle, Queen Alara ruled with grace and an iron will. Yet her greatest enemy was not across the sea. It was her own brother, Prince Rowan. Once inseparable, they had grown apart after their father's death. When Rowan returned from exile to claim the throne, he brought with him proof of betrayal, letters that could destroy her legitimacy. The council trembled as he demanded justice. "The crown is mine by birthright," he declared before all. Alara smiled softly, though her eyes gleamed like drawn blades. "And yet it rests upon my head," she replied. That night, the queen summoned her captain. "Do what must be done. The kingdom cannot afford division." At dawn, Rowan's lifeless body was found in his cell.
The cause unknown, the truth buried beneath royal silence.
Ilara wore mourning black for months, her tears convincing even her closest advisors. But every time she looked at the throne, she saw Rowan's shadow sitting beside her, whispering the words that tore her peace apart. "Sister, you killed more than a brother! You killed your own bloodline!" King Darius of Valmar was feared as a conqueror, but loved as a father. His empire stretched across mountains, and seas until a single night shattered it all. During a royal banquet, a masked servant poured his wine. Moments later, the king clutched his throat, collapsing before his horrified court.
Panic erupted, and suspicion spread like fire.
The queen fainted, the princes shouted, and the nobles fled. Within hours, the assassin was caught, a young man named Lysander, who claimed to serve no master. But under torture, he confessed. The order came from within the palace. What the world never learned was that the queen herself had planned it. Darius had discovered her affair with the royal advisor and planned to have her executed at dawn. To survive, she struck first. The empire, once united by conquest, fell into chaos as her sons fought for power. In her final years, the widowed queen lived locked in a tower, surrounded by guards yet utterly alone. Every night, she heard Darius' dying gasp echo through her dreams, a haunting reminder that the empire she ruled with deceit had died the moment her husband's heart stopped beating. In the realm of Dravencourt, Betrayal wore a crown. King Elorian had ruled with peace for decades, but his nephew, Lord Kieran, coveted his throne. When whispers of succession reached the young noble's ears, greed took root deeper than loyalty ever had. Kieran plotted in silence. He bribed guards, turned servants into spies, and spread rumors that the king had gone mad. One stormy night, when the thunder cloaked his steps, Kieran entered the royal chambers with a dagger blessed by priests of deceit. The old king awoke, too late. His final breath was a curse, not forgiveness. At dawn, Kieran declared the king had died in his sleep. He wore black for a day, then gold forever. But the people whispered they knew. The royal blood that stained the throne never faded. Years later, when plague struck the kingdom, it began in the palace. Kieran's heirs died one by one, their bodies cold and pale as moonlight. The priests said it was divine retribution. In the end, Kirin died alone on the same throne he had stolen, surrounded not by courtiers, but by the ghosts of those he betrayed. Princess Selene of Avern was born into beauty and blood. Her charm could melt any heart, but beneath her silken jewels lay a heart forged from ambition. When her father, the king, announced her younger brother as heir, something inside her broke. At first, she smiled, pretending to bless his future. But jealousy turned her love into venom. She sought out the royal alchemist, demanding a potion that would make death look like sleep. One night, she crept into her brother's room, the potion trembling in her hand. She whispered an apology as she poured it into his wine. The next morning, the palace mourned. The mysterious illness claimed the prince, and Selene wept so convincingly that no one questioned her grief. Months later, she was crowned queen. Yet, from that day forward, she refused to drink wine, fearing someone might do to her what she had done to him. Her reign was prosperous, but peace never touched her soul. Each night, she saw her brother's eyes in the mirror, trusting, innocent, and forever accusing. When she died decades later, the royal physician claimed she died peacefully in her sleep.
But her hand was clenched tight, as if reaching for forgiveness that never came. The moon hung pale above castle, thereth when the king's cry shattered the silence.
Servants rushed toward the royal bedchamber, but the guards stood frozen, knowing what had just happened. King Roderick, once a warrior feared across kingdoms, was found sprawled upon his bed, his throat opened by a blade as fine as silver. The queen, Seraphine, was discovered beside him, her gown soaked crimson. She trembled and swore she had awoken too late to stop the assassin. Yet the chamber door was locked from within. No intruder! No witness! Only 2 people had entered that room that night, one now dead, the other alive. The council dared not accuse her, for Seraphine was adored by the people and backed by her father's army.
A royal inquiry declared the murder an act of dark sorcery.
But whispers told a different tale, that the queen had grown weary of her husband's cruelty and his infidelities. For years she ruled as regent, her reign peaceful yet drenched in suspicion. On her deathbed, a priest claimed she confessed her sin, whispering through tears, "I only wanted freedom, not his blood." But history never recorded that. To the world, she remained the grieving queen, untouched, unpunished, unforgettable. Duke Morlin of Thalric was a man born of ambition and greed. Though not of royal blood, his influence over the young King Arion was absolute. But when the king's wife bore a son, the duke's grip began to loosen. The child was the promise of a future without him, a threat he could not allow to live. When the prince turned 7, a great festival filled the capital with joy.
Beneath the fireworks and music, Morland's assassin moved like a shadow.
That night, the young heir was found lifeless in his chambers, the royal seal clutched in his tiny hand. The court called it illness. The people mourned, and Morland comforted the grieving king with hollow words.
But guilt is a patient poison.
Years later, the dying king uncovered letters sealed with the duke's crest, proof of the plot that had stolen his son.
Enraged, Arion ordered Morland's execution, but the duke vanished before dawn, leaving behind only a blood-stained cloak.
Legends say his ghost still walks the castle halls, whispering the name of the child he silenced. And every heir born to Thalric since has died before their 10th birthday, a curse carved from ambition and sealed in blood. Queen Amara of Alaris ruled beside her husband with grace, yet power was never meant to be shared. When King Idrin began listening to foreign advisors and planning to strip her of influence, she acted not with an army, but with shadows. Among her servants was a quiet woman named Lysa, her maid since childhood. Few noticed her. Fewer remembered her face. But Lysa was more than a servant. She was the queen's blade, a silent assassin raised from birth to protect Amara at any cost. Late one winter's night, the king was found dead in his study, a single puncture wound beneath his ribs. The weapon was never found, the killer never caught. Queen Amara wept publicly, her grief winning the hearts of the people. But that night, as she sat alone, Lysa appeared from the darkness. "It is done, my queen," she whispered. Years later, when rebellion threatened the crown, Lysa's body was discovered beneath the castle, her throat cut, her identity revealed. The queen ordered her buried in secret, away from royal ground. Some said it was regret. Others said it was fear. Yet on stormy nights, a shadow still lingers near the throne, loyal even in death. King Edric and Queen Solara were a symbol of love and unity to souls bound by fate and politics alike. Their reign brought peace after generations of bloodshed. But peace breeds envy, and within the court, dark hearts plotted. One night, as the couple dined privately, a servant brought them wine from their own vineyards, a gift they trusted. Hours later, dawn rose over silence. No servants stirred. No guards were called. When their attendants finally entered the royal chamber, they found the king and queen lying side by side, hands entwined, eyes forever closed. The court declared it a divine departure, a miracle of love, two rulers dying together. Statues were built, songs composed, legends born. But in truth, the goblets from that night were missing, and the servant who poured their wine was never seen again. Centuries later, when their tomb was opened for restoration, traces of a rare poison were found in their bones. Historians tried to erase the discovery, fearing it would taint the legend. But truth lingers longer than lies. The lovers who were celebrated as saints were, in truth, victims slain by those who envied their peace more than they valued their souls. Prince Edric of Varen was destined to unite the kingdom. Brave, noble, and beloved by the people, he threatened every noble's ambition. But one man, General Halver, saw in him not a future king, but an obstacle. Edric led a campaign against rebels in the north, a battle meant to secure his legacy. On the eve of victory, his wine was laced with venom. He never awoke. The next morning, his men found him cold beside his sword.
The army faltered. The enemy struck, and chaos devoured the realm.
When word reached the capital, the king died of grief within days. His death left a throne without an heir, and a nation without unity. Halver seized power, claiming to restore order, but instead ignited a civil war that burned for a generation.
Years later, an old soldier confessed before dying that the general had ordered the prince's death.
The confession was buried, and Halver's descendants ruled under a cursed name. Each generation ended the same way: betrayal, blood, and an empty throne. The kingdom of Varen never recovered. All that remains of its legacy is a single crown, blackened with age, and a legend whispered by scholars. A kingdom that kills its heir, kills its future. The grand cathedral of Vera was filled with light, music, and the scent of roses. King Theon's coronation marked the dawn of a new era, and the nobles cheered as golden wine flowed into crystal chalices. But not every smile was sincere.
Among the courtiers stood Duke Regan, once Theon's mentor, now his most bitter rival.
When the king lifted his cup to toast his kingdom, the duke's trembling hand poured from his own decanter. "To prosperity," Regan said, and Theon drank. Within moments, the young king's laughter turned to coughing. His crown slipped from his head as he collapsed onto the marble floor. Panic swept through the hall. The duke wept theatrically, claiming the king had succumbed to nerves or exhaustion. Yet, as the royal physician arrived, Theon's lips were already darkened by the poison of black wolfsbane rare, royal, and unmistakable. The duke was arrested the next morning. But before the trial could begin, he was found dead in his celly's wine cup beside him.
The kingdom declared a divine justice.
But in the dusty records of the royal archives, one note remains. The poison in both cups was the same. No one ever learned who poured first. In the frozen kingdom of Norvale, a prince was born beneath an eclipse. The court whispered that such a birth was cursed. His mother died in childbirth, and his father, King Odrin, blamed the boy for it. The infant was sent away, raised in silence, never named, never spoken of. Years later, when the king's eldest son died in battle, the forgotten prince now, a man, was summoned back to court. The people adored him instantly. He was noble, kind, and just. But the king's heart, blackened by guilt and superstition, saw only a ghost of the wife he'd lost. On the night of the winter festival, the prince joined his father for a private meal. They spoke little.
By dawn, servants found the young man dead, his face pale as snow, a chalice of honeyed mead beside him. The king declared it an illness, and within a day, the prince was buried in an unmarked grave beyond the royal crypts.
Centuries later, when the tombs were excavated, a single coffin was found apart from the others instead.
The skeleton of a young man still wearing a royal pendant, engraved with one word: son. The kingdom never knew his name.
But his story became its most haunting legend. Queen Adriel and King Cassian were wed for alliance, not love. Their marriage united to rival dynasties, but peace forged in resentment is peace bound to break. Cassian ruled with pride, ignoring his wife's counsel, while Adriel, humiliated and dismissed, began plotting her revenge. When Cassian took a mistress from the court, a young noblewoman named Lyria the Queen's, fury turned lethal. She summoned the royal physician, promising him wealth beyond measure. "Make me a poison that kills like love," she said, sweetly, without suspicion. Weeks later, the king fell ill after sharing wine with his beloved Lyria. Both were found dead by morning, their hands clasped across the table. The queen declared 3 days of mourning and played her role as the grieving widow flawlessly. But years later, as she lay dying, Adriel confessed to her confessor that the poison she used was not meant for both. "He was to die alone," she whispered, but she shared his cup. The priest recorded her confession, but sealed it away for a century. When it was finally uncovered, the people of Sarath realized their most beloved queen was also their most cunning murderer.
King Harwin of Eldmere trusted no one but his younger brother, Prince Garrick.
They had survived war together, shared a crown's burden, and built a kingdom of wealth.
But when the royal astrologer prophesied that only one brother would rule beneath the red moon, loyalty turned to dread.
One night, as the blood moon rose, Harwin invited his brother to feast. They drank, laughed, and remembered their youth. But as the candles burned low, Garrick drew his dagger. "Forgive me, brother," he whispered and struck. The guards found the king's body before dawn. Garrick wept before the court, claiming assassins had done it. Yet the dagger, still hidden in his cloak, bore his name, etched in silver. He was crowned king weeks later, but the people never sang for him. Soon after, his mind began to unravel. He claimed to see Harwin's spirit standing in the throne room, bleeding, silent, unblinking. Every mirror showed the face of the brother he'd slain. One winter morning, Garrick was found dead, stabbed through the heart with the same dagger. Some say it was guilt. Others say the prophecy simply fulfilled itself. Princess Evelyn of Darzin was born into gold but raised in shadows. Intelligent and fierce, she was denied power by her father, King Ulrich, who declared that a woman's place is to marry, not to rule.
When her younger brother was crowned heir, Evelyn's patience shattered.
She began weaving alliances in secret, promising noblemen land and favor in exchange for loyalty. Her plan was simple: kill the prince, claim the throne. But the night before the plot was to unfold, her most trusted confidant betrayed her for gold. Guards stormed her chambers, finding the poisoned blade and her written confession. The king, heartbroken, could not bring himself to execute his daughter. Instead, he locked her in the northern tower, forever sealed from the world.
Years passed.
Servants whispered that the princess still sang at night, her voice echoing through the empty halls. When Ulrich died, his son ordered the tower opened. Inside they found only dust, bones, and a single crown of dried flowers upon the windowsill. Carved into the stone beside her, remains were her final words: "I would have been a better king." The kingdom of Thornavale once boasted a royal line said to be chosen by the gods. But when King Eredor's eldest son plotted rebellion, divine favor turned to wrath. Prince Kael gathered loyalists to overthrow his father, believing he could save the kingdom from tyranny. Yet spies whispered faster than soldiers marched. Before dawn, Kael and his men were captured without a blade drawn. The king ordered no public trillinly silence. "Let the people think he left for pilgrimage," he told his council. That night, the prince was led to the dungeons beneath the castle, where no torches burned. His execution was quick, the method unspoken, his body buried beneath the stone floor. The next day, Cale's name was struck from every royal record. The king declared him childless, his portraits burned, his memory forbidden. But history cannot be buried with the dead. A century later, workers restoring the catacombs uncovered a skeleton bound in gold chains, a crown fragment beside it. The inscription read, "Heir of the Sun." The dynasty fell only 2 generations later, ending as quietly as it had silenced its own heir. Some say Cale's ghost still lingers beneath the castle, waiting for a name to remember him by. King Martin of Astoria was known for his paranoia. His reign began in blood and ended in madness. When an oracle warned him that his son would rise greater than the father, fear took hold of his soul like poison. Prince Talon was no warrior, but a scalera gentle boy with a vision of peace. His people adored him, calling him the light of Astoria. The more they loved him, the more the king's mind unraveled. One evening, Martin summoned his son to the throne room. "Walk with me," he said. Together, they entered the royal gardens, lit by moonlight. There, beneath the silver trees, the king embraced his son and plunged a dagger beneath his ribs. By morning, Martin claimed assassins had struck, yet the dagger found in the prince's heart bore the royal crest, a king's own weapon. Haunted by guilt, Martin soon descended into madness. He spoke to shadows, calling out his son's name. On the 7th night, the guards found him dead upon the throne, his crown fallen to the floor. No one claimed the seat again. The castle was abandoned, the royal line extinguished by the very hand sworn to preserve it. Queen Lorena of Arest was a beauty feared more than loved. Her husband, King Darien, had betrayed her with a noble woman from the court, leaving her humiliated before the realm. Revenge became her faith, and death, her priest. She summoned a man known only as the Raven, a masked assassin whispered of in nightmares. "Make it look like sorrow," she told him, "not vengeance." For a price paid in diamonds and silence, the Raven agreed. A week later, the king was found lifeless in his bath, his skin pale and unmarked. The physicians declared it heart failure. The queen wept at the funeral, draped in white instead of black. But vengeance has no loyalty. The assassin returned, demanding more gold than promised. Lorena refused. That night, she too was found dead, her throat slit, her crown soaked in her own blood. The Raven was never caught. Some say he vanished into the woods. Others claim the queen's spirit hunts him still. In the royal archives, a note written in Lorena's hand remains sealed beside her portrait. "I asked for justice. I received truth. There is no mercy for the wicked, even among the wicked." King Elric ascended the throne at the age of 10 after his father's sudden death. The court called him the Boy King, but to the nobles, he was merely a puppet to control.
Regent Lord Halden swore to protect him,
But ambition has no conscience. While the kingdom grieved, holding gathered allies.
"A child cannot rule," he whispered, "but I can rule for him." Within months, rumors of the young king's illness spread. Servants claimed he coughed blood, that the royal physician could not cure him. In truth, the child's milk had been mixed with silver powder slow poison. Elric grew weaker each day until one morning, he simply didn't wake. The regent wept publicly and crowned himself the next week. But the people's love for the boy never faded. On the anniversary of his death, a riot broke out, storming the palace. Lord Halden was dragged from his throne and hanged by the same rope that once held the royal banners. The dynasty ended with that child innocent, gentle, and betrayed by the man sworn to protect him. In the palace garden, a single marble statue of the boy remains, his expression serene, his hand clutching a flower carved in stone. Prince Ren of Thalwyn was never meant to rule. As the youngest of 5 brothers, his destiny was to live quietly, far from the crown's burden. But fate changed when each of his elder brothers died in accidents too convenient to be chance. First, the eldest drowned during a hunt. The second fell from his horse. The third was poisoned at a feast.
the fourth vanished in battle, his body never found.
By then, Ren had become a Rand, The kingdom whispered of a curse. Fearing he'd be next, Ren begged his father to step aside from succession, but the king refused. "The bloodline must endure," he said. Days later, Ren was found dead in his bed, no wounds, no poison, no struggle. His eyes were open, frozen in terror. Some claimed the curse had taken him. Others believed the king himself had ordered the deaths to prevent his sons from fighting for the throne. When the king died soon after, the royal vault was sealed forever. Yet every few decades, during storms, the guards swear they hear 5 voices crying beneath the stone floors, brothers calling out for justice that never came. In the golden court of Aurelian, King Thoros was a man of war, but a fool in love. His heart belonged not to his queen, but to his mistress Lady Celian, a woman of low birth and dangerous ambition. The court despised her. The queen despised her more.
When whispers of marriage between Thoros and Celian spread, the nobles plotted in secret.
The royal line, they said, could not be tainted by lust. So one night, as the lovers dined privately in the rose garden, a servant replaced their wine with a tincture known as the widow's kislow, sweet and undetectable. The next morning, both were found dead, their hands intertwined, smiles still frozen on their faces. The queen wept before the kingdom, declaring divine punishment for sin. But behind closed doors, she burned Celian's letters, hiding the proof of her own hand in the crime. For decades, poets sang of the tragic lovers who defied the crown. Yet, when the queen's tomb was opened, centuries later, a locket was found upon her chest inside, a lock of Celian's hair, perfectly preserved. Perhaps love had not died that night, only changed its face. When King Roland Tuavera died suddenly, his mother Queen Dowager Ismara was left widowed, yet still powerful. Her son, young King Edwin, adored her, but she despised his new bride, the gentle Queen Alina. Ismara believed no woman should share her influence, especially not one who dared replace her at court. One evening, as the family dined in the Hall of Roses, Ismara raised her goblet and smiled at her daughter-in-law. "To the future of our house," she said. Moments later, Alina collapsed, her breath gone before the cup even fell from her hand. The court was horrified. The dowager wailed in feigned grief, but the royal alchemist discovered traces of belladonna in the queen's cup. When confronted, Ismara laughed. "I did what was necessary," she hissed. King Edwin, torn between justice and love, ordered her confined to a convent for life. But days before her departure, she drank from a flask, she carried herself, and died instantly. No antidote was ever found. Her tomb bore no royal symbols, no crown, no inscription, only a single word etched by an unknown hand. Mother. Prince Calder of Durnhelm was known as the gentle Heir, beloved by all. But beneath his calm voice and kind eyes was a heart consumed by envy. His father, King Heir, had promised the throne to Calder's older brother, Prince Arvan, a man brave in battle and adored by the army. The night before Arvan's coronation, Calder visited him in his chamber with a gift, a golden dagger adorned with the family crest. "For your new reign," he said, smiling. The next morning, servants found Arvan dead, the same dagger buried in his chest.
Calder wept before the court, vowing vengeance for his brother.
The king, broken by grief, named him heir in Arvan's place. But when the crown was placed upon Calder's head, drops of blood appeared on the gold, staining his brow. For years, he ruled with power and peace, but never joy. On his deathbed, he whispered, "The crown is heavier than I imagined, because it bleeds." When his tomb was opened, generations later, the dagger that killed his brother lay across his chest, still gleaming. The court of King Giraffe was famous for its splendor, and no event was grander than the Feast of Unitia celebration meant to end decades of noble feuds. Lords, knights, and clergy filled the great hall as torches burned and musicians played. But beneath the laughter, hatred simmered. A rival noble family had sworn vengeance after Jorith's soldiers slaughtered their kin. They arrived at the feast bearing gifts, barrels of rare red wine, offered with smiles. As the night wore on, Jaroth raised his goblet high. "Tonight," he declared, "we drink 2 peas." Moments later, half the court fell to the floor, writhing in agony. The poison was swift and merciless. Jorith's body was found, still clutching his crown. The assassins were executed within days, but the damage was done. The kingdom fractured, nobles turned on one another, and peace died with the king. In the ruins of the old palace, historians found goblets fused by heat, their rims blackened by fire. Some say the poison ignited during the chaos, consuming the hall in flames. Others claim the gods themselves struck the place down because mortals had turned unity into murder. When King Leoric of Astwin died suddenly, the kingdom expected his son, Prince Darius, to ascend the throne. But on the night before the coronation, the prince disappeared without a trace. The guards swore they saw him last, walking toward the chapel, carrying his father's sword. At dawn, the doors were found locked from within. When they were broken open, the chapel was empty. No prince, no blood, no sign of struggle. The council declared him kidnapped or dead. His uncle,
Lord Moran,
claimed the crown for stability's sake. Yet whispers spread that Marin himself had arranged the prince's disappearance. Years later, a hunter deep in the forest discovered an ancient tomb hidden beneath ivy and roots. Inside lay a skeleton wearing the royal seal of Astwin, a rusted sword laid across its chest. The inscription above the tomb read, "The true king waits in silence." Lord Moran's descendants ruled for a century.
but their line ended in madness and ruin.
Some said the ghost of Darius still wandered the forest, watching, waiting for the day his crown would be returned. Princess Aradia of Velera was known for her grace, beauty, and kindness.
But behind her soft smile lay the steel of survival.
Her father, King Solric, had fallen ill, and the council whispered that her cousin, Lord Fenric, was to inherit the crown, a man she knew would destroy her family. On a moonless night, Aradia visited Fenric's chamber under the guise of peace. She brought a goblet of honeyed wine and spoke softly of loyalty and blood. He drank, and within minutes, his face twisted in agony.
When the king died weeks later, Aradia was crowned queen.
The people praised her for saving the realm from a tyrant, yet those closest to her swore that every night she stood by the window, staring into the dark, whispering, "Forgive me, cousin." Years later, a monk discovered her private diary, its final page stained with tears. "The crown sits light upon my head, but heavy upon my soul." The diary was burned on royal command, but not before its words spread across the kingdom. In the frostbitten kingdom of Neroth, 2 sons were born to Queen Isoria, identical twins, indistinguishable even to their mother. To prevent confusion, one was named King Aloric, the other hidden away as his shadow, a secret protector and double. For years, the twins served quietly, impersonating the king in public danger. But when a rebellion rose against the crown, a plot was hatched to assassinate Alaric during a royal parade. The twin took his place once more. The arrows struck true. The king fell dead before the cheering crowd, while the true Alaric watched from safety, unseen. The people mourned their monarch, never knowing the truth. Yet the guilt devoured Alaric. He ruled in silence, refusing portraits or celebrations. When he died, his will demanded that his tomb remained unmarked, for the one who wore the crown in death deserves it more than I. When the royal crypt was opened centuries later, 2 coffins lay side by side, identical in size, both inscribed only with a single word, King. Crown Prince Theon of Arvest was adored by the people, but hated by his father, King Boric, a paranoid ruler who saw betrayal in every shadow. When Theon's popularity began to outshine the throne, the king's fears turned to rage. One night, guards stormed the prince's chamber under orders, sealed by the king himself. Theon was dragged to the dungeons and charged with treason, his only crime being loved by the realm. There was no trial.
By dawn, the prince was gone, his name erased from records.
The king told the people that Theon had died of fever. But the court jester, who had witnessed the execution, carved a message into the dungeon wall before vanishing. He died standing, not kneeling. Years later, when rebels overthrew Baruch's line, they uncovered the hidden cell. The prince's ring was still on the skeletal hand chained to the wall. The rebels crowned his bones with a wreath of silver thorns, calling him the king who never reigned. The marriage of Princess Evelyn to Lord Ilarion was meant to unite two powerful houses. The streets bloomed with flowers, bells rang through the kingdom, and the people rejoiced. But love was not the reason behind the union. It was a pact of greed and deceit. Lord Ilarion had poisoned his previous wife to gain her lands, a fact Eveline learned only days before the wedding. She confronted him in the candlelit halls of the palace. He smiled and said, "A crown is worth any sin." That night, during the wedding feast, the bride and groom shared their ceremonial drink. Moments later, both fell to the floor, gasping for air. The chalice was found tainted. Each had poisoned the other. The court called it a tragedy. The people called it justice. Their golden cups were sealed together in the royal vault as a warning to future rulers. When love and power drink from the same cup, both die.
King Renaud IV was the last of his dynasty.
Obsessed with immortality and fearful of betrayal, he became convinced that his own bloodline plotted to destroy him. His sons, daughters, even infants, none escaped his suspicion. One by one, they disappeared.
Some whispered he sent them to monasteries.
Others said he buried them alive beneath the castle. When the people finally revolted, they stormed the palace and found the royal crypt newly sealed. Inside were 12 coffins, his children all. Identical, untouched. At the center stood Renaud's throne, carved from stone, his corpse still seated upon it, crown upon his head,
his sword across his knees.
On the wall behind him, written in his own hand, were the words, "The crown is safe. The blood has ended." No heir remained. His dynasty was erased not by rebellion, but by its own hand. And so ended the house of Anald the kings, who feared death so much they killed their future.